I recently did a podcast with some people similar to this scenario where it's really cool. TEDx speaker Aditya Junjunwala from Pune. A lady called Kay Solanki, who is an executive business coach, succession coach, chairperson, so qualified and experienced, and just speaks at that entire business language level, but an amazing human. And Adele, who is based in South Africa, who is also a quality mind mentor coach like myself. And we spoke a lot about goal setting, planning and execution. And it was staggering how what I thought was a straightforward topic, the different angles came into it. But one of the things that came up, which I think is similar to something you're interested in, is this notion of what we want versus what we actually need. Can you expand on that one for me a bit?
Yeah, that seems to be my interest, because these days when we see a lot of people, most of them are glued to their phones. It wasn't the case 10, 15 years back.
Yes.
And this is actually sort of become like an epidemic. People want that instant gratification. That's a sudden boost in your dopamine. You get a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And you are into that loop, constant loop of getting that instant gratification. Because of which, most of the time we push away what we exactly need, and we are more inclined towards what we want. So this self-sabotaging behavior can be a bigger issue in the long run. Like, just for an example,
yes,
if I have to prepare for some exams in the coming week, and I see on Netflix, there is some very interesting series that's running. And I see, I probably would go for one episode. Oh, it's really intriguing. I need to know what's next, right? So I'll go on to the next episode. And so much so that I just binge watch the entire season. That's what is the result of instant gratification that happens. Whereas I should be studying, right? Like, I should be preparing for my exams. Whereas now I am binge watching, tired to the core mentally, because I was binge watching whole night and I couldn't catch up on my sleep. So exactly, I'm not doing what I exactly need to do, but I'm doing what I exactly want to do. And this self-sabotaging behavior is deeply rooted to neuroscience. In the brain structure, when we talk about basal ganglia, it is mostly responsible for decision making. So this helps you in looking out the options and then deciding what is exactly correct for you.
Yes.
So you are sort of self-sabotaging. You're not able to decide upon what exactly you need to do. And this is all actually a result of constantly abusing your brain in a way that you're wanting that dopamine hit again and again and again. That puts you into the loop so much so that you are actually hampering your self-worth. Self-worth is something far more connected to how you present yourself and how much confidence you have within. And these days, if you see the body language of people shy away from themselves.
Yeah.
Why shying away from being yourself? Why being authentic seems, really difficult? Why being vulnerable seems difficult?
Yeah.
Because these days, everyone wants to be Instagrammable. That's what is hampering the entire generation, I would say. Ooh. Especially the Gen Zs.
So now you sound nearly as old as I am, and we both know you're nowhere near as old as I am. I spoke about this exact topic at a high-end health and lifestyle club. About, the habit loop. You have the trigger, the automated response, the reward, the loop, and it's self-gratifying. And I was talking about dopamine and donuts because our bodies are still the same bodies from 40,000 years ago. They're still the same hardware. Once upon a time, I could walk past donut stores and laugh at people for spending 25 Australian dollars on 4 gourmet donuts. And so I'd walk past the donut store like I was walking past a rubbish bin. One day a staff member bought me some for my birthday a few years ago, and I sort of said, I don't like these, I don't eat them. Bit into that crunchy exterior that gave way to the soft, fluffy center, and then the caramel cream burst forward. And the dopamine is the pleasure echo, because these ultra processed foods tick off the sugar, the salt, the fat, the texture that doesn't exist in nature. But it's such a concentrated pleasure bomb, our body goes, oh my God, that must be good for you. And so it creates that pleasure echo. My brain's telling me the donut is better than sex, and before I know it, I'm back in the donut store and I'm buying 4 of them. The Netflix sound, ba-ba, the start of every episode, the ting of the mobile phone. And you explain that to people who go, yeah, well, I don't like donuts, but I'll go and have a cigarette now and I'll be back in a moment. Acknowledging what you've said about what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Now, you could tell me and lecture me on not doing something that I shouldn't do. But we also both know that after this call, we'll go and do things that we'd probably go, I'd prefer the other person didn't know about, whether it's eating the donut, having a scotch, binge watching Netflix, whatever it is. How do we separate ourselves out of the advice that we give our coaching clients, but still be authentic? You know, how do we balance that? You need to do this, but sometimes we want to do this and that's okay.
Frankly speaking, like there is a information overload out there. We know what we need to do. We also know what is not good for us. We know everything.
We do know everything.
We have so much of information overload. That's what. We know everything, but it's up to us how we are actually using this information or knowledge. Are we just learning and, you know, being satisfied? Okay, I know so many things. I have read so many books. I have referred to so many articles. I know a hell lot of research items.
Yes, yes.
But at the end of the day, if that's not put to practice, it's basically nil. There is a lot of learning as well as unlearning that needs to happen here. So when I talk about unlearning, we are conditioned, our belief systems actually shape our learning. We need to understand that the situation that we are in could be the result of conditioning. For example, during the childhood days, we were told that do not talk to strangers. You're not supposed to talk to strangers. These days, if you don't talk to anybody, you might be living in silo, you won't network, and at the end of the day, you might be depressed. I'm not saying that talking to strangers is correct or whatever advice that we were given during the childhood days was wrong. It was correct for that situation, but we need to evolve. We need to unlearn. Now, current situation, the need is we need to talk to people. We need to interact with people. We need to collaborate with people. We need to network with people. So that unlearning needs to happen, and that needs to be, you know, exchanged with relearning. That the current requirement is we need to talk to people. We need to exchange ideas, exchange energies, and that's how the whole balance needs to be maintained.
It's interesting because I've had this conversation in a number of different ways with people. My schooling up until I was about 15 was pretty much the same as what my parents experienced. It was analog. Now, CD-ROMs had come in, but they were incredibly expensive and they were only for music at that stage. So we're talking mid to late 80s type time frame here, where digital things existed, but they weren't maybe changing our lives. I went to a class, I took books, and I wrote with a pen, which is what my mum and dad did. Then I have brothers who are 10 and 12 years younger than me. And in that 10 or 12 years difference, when they were doing their final years of high school, they had internet, CD-ROM and mobile phone. And it changed everything. The speed at which they could assimilate knowledge was insane. It was really important at school to have neat handwriting. My daughter touch types. The only time she's going to write by hand is going to be in exams. Most of her communication is digital. And I had this conversation with someone the other day and we kept going, and it's sort of, well, we're very controlling on my daughter's phone use. It doesn't have social media. And that's because of the whole body dysmorphia thing, the unrealistic expectations, the time on the screens and so on. But then I've had friends who are paediatricians saying, but yes, that's how they communicate these days. And then I sort of say, well, that actually isn't communication. It's not real. You're not with the person. Someone else who's a psychologist said to me, well, that's the way you did it, Mark. Do you actually think you're qualified to tell your child how to communicate anymore than it is to have important handwriting? You know, are we moving to an era where for a period of time personal communication is optional? Is that where we're going to be coaching a lot of people to get used to being around people again? Can we actually tell kids how to live their lives anymore? I don't know the answer. It's
altogether a different world, and we probably are not the right people to advise. I mean, we are not advanced enough to advise our already smart kids.
I think we're both saying there is a bit of a lost art around the one-on-one communication. When you coach one-on-one, given that people are struggling to communicate openly with one another, do you find the same in one-on-one coaching?
Yes, definitely. The attention span has greatly reduced, right? These days, people are struggling to pay attention. It's almost shrunk to say 8 seconds. It was earlier, it was around 12 seconds, and now it has reduced to less than what a goldfish has.
Is that the research at the moment, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy, right? Like people can't pay attention and people are not probably getting involved as the social media language goes. You need to have a hook in order to engage people these days. So be it your social media post, be it your conversation, you need to have that talking hook in order to get people into the conversation. Otherwise, it's becoming difficult these days to strike that meaningful conversation with people. And this has a lot of linkage towards growth, because if your attention span is impacted, your growth is also impacted. And I refer to that as the currency of growth.
Ooh, look at you with all
Yeah.
your fancy terms. So currency of growth is related to attention span. I can see that, yeah.